Hello, friends. All right. I am super excited for today, and I hope I haven't built it up too much, but yeah, I also hope that you're excited for today. Sorry, I'm like witness relocation type interview style where my eyes are all in shadow, and there we go. Okay. Um, Okay, so I want to just address a couple of comments in chat so far. Annie says, my mind is open. I'm one of the ones who does not understand abstract art at all. I've seen a few I like, but I don't understand it. And Eileen says something very similar. It's just a bunch of randomness. Okay, so I think that is a huge thing that a lot of people feel about abstract art. And I think it's for a reason. I think there's a very good reason for it. So, a lot of people believe that abstract art, there's no skill to it. It's just mindless, right? And anything mindless is how can it be worthwhile if you didn't put any thought into it? You didn't put any skill into it. You just took a bunch of paint and threw it at a canvas and said, it's abstract. As if you calling it abstract somehow elevates you to this point where you're like, if you don't understand it, you just don't get abstract. And it's very pretentious and very stupid. And I think, sorry, I gotta turn on my mood lighting. I think that happens for a few reasons. Some people don't want to take the time to understand it, or, whatever. Or they're intimidated by, I feel like I should understand this, but I don't. And so I reject it. And I understand that mindset too. But I think one of the things, especially today with the internet, is that anybody can do anything, obviously, and put it on the internet and feel legitimized or whatever. And I think that there are people, and I've probably done this before myself, who do just just throw it on there and be like, it's abstract. And then everybody's like, is it? It's not very good. So I think that kind of puts a bad taste in a lot of people's mouths for abstract art as well. Also, hello everybody that I didn't say hi to. I know I got in here a little bit late and then just jumped right on. Yeah, so Tammy says, I don't hate it. I just feel incapable of making it successfully. And I understand that, Tammy. So, what I wanted to kind of talk about a little bit today, and I apologize for being so vague. I'm going to be kind of vague, but I'll explain why. So, I think this week I have spent a huge amount of time talking about, looking at, thinking about, planning, spending ridiculous amounts of money on impulse purchases, because I think that I finally cracked, in my head anyway, the abstract art that I want to make. So for a long time now, I felt like, I really want to make abstract art because I want to be able to communicate thoughts, feelings, moods, emotions, all of those things, but without like beating you over the head with it. And that's kind of what I have. Tammy, we're all a little bit cracked, but I cracked the code. What was I saying? Full on misfire there. Anyway, yeah. Oh, yeah. I try to communicate those things through like my landscape paintings, being kind of moody and mysterious and or like paintings like this, dead flowers in a vase in front of a window of a house that looks pretty old and abandoned. Like what kind of feelings does that stir up in you? And does it remind you of something? To some people, it's very sad painting. To other people, it's a happy painting or nostalgic or whatever. And I want to continue to communicate those things, but I have started to feel kind of confined by a canvas, by my techniques, by my colors, by my subject matters. And I think that's why I've had a hard time painting lately. And so I've wanted to try and move into abstract work, but I didn't know where to begin either. You know, I'm like, well, I guess I can just throw some stuff randomly at a canvas and hope that I can turn it into what I want. So I did some deep diving this week and really like listing out things that I'm passionate about, things that I would love to be able to do, things that I want to be able to communicate, just really kind of reassessing my entire thing. And I decided that the best way for me to do abstract art is to completely break away from what it is that I have been doing for years. And so I'm going to be doing like a heavy mixed media thing. So I'm going to show you just part of my planning process that I came up with. It was in the middle of the night because I had this idea of like what I wanted to reach for, what kind of things I wanted to do, but I didn't know how I was going to frame the composition. Like, how am I going to decide what the composition is? Is it just going to be random? I don't want it to be random. So in doing abstract art, I just want to kind of point out and let you know that I think that planning with abstract art is, the little family emergency we had this week is resolved, and I just got a text about it, so yay. Planning is so much more important, I think, with abstract art than like the art that I have been making. The art that I have been making, I can pretty much just sit down and just start doing something, and I can plan it as I go. I can figure it out as I go. But I can't with this. And I want you guys to understand that in order to make good abstract art, you really kind of have to do a little bit of planning. So I want you guys, let's start out with, if you have your notes, I think I have my notes here. Yeah, I have my little notes here. These terms that we did recently about, you know, form and hue and bias and all that stuff, these are really important in all kinds of visual art, really, but I think more so in abstract art. And that's because in representational art, you've got the subject matter that can carry a lot of weight, right? If, for example, my painting here, that I just keep picking on because you can see it fairly clearly, if there's imperfections in other design elements that I have chosen, it can be forgiven a little bit more because there's a subject matter that you can kind of focus on. But when it's abstract, all you have are the decisions that you've made. So let's run over these super quick. I don't want my ear itches today, sorry. Okay. And yes, it is. It can be. Joanna says that she loves abstract because it's for, you know, clearing the mind and seeing what it starts like, and, you know, and it's true. And I'm kind of approaching these abstract pieces I want to make from that kind of meditative, almost a self-care place. And I'm already kind of thinking of ways that will work out for me. Like I said, I'm being very vague about it. But so not the first, but the elements you need to think about when working on abstract, you want to have a focus. What's your focus going to be? And maybe your focus isn't a specific element. Maybe your focus is a specific mood. That's totally possible. You don't have to have make sure there's one dot of some crazy color over here and that's the focus, although it can be. Rhythm, so shapes or textures that kind of carry you from one place to another. If you think about Jackson Pollock's work, which I know a lot of people really don't love Jackson Pollock's work, I'm not a huge fan, but I appreciate it for what it is greatly. His paintings are all about rhythm, those splatters. It's repetitive shapes and motions all throughout the painting. So that's rhythm. Balance. Those of you who have the Edgar Payne book, balance is a big part of some of the compositions that he talks about. So right here, that's kind of what I was drawing here. He's got this large, heavy element closer to the center and this smaller, more delicate, a little farther to the edge. And that kind of balances the composition, where if they were both really heavy ones right on the edge, it would feel weird. Anyway, so balance is an important thing. If you're looking at your painting and you feel like it's kind of leaning, you got to balance it a little bit. Harmony is things that exist together, that work together, that look related. You can have harmony in color. You can have harmony in texture. You can have harmony in shapes. Like here, all of my shapes have these kind of organic curves. Even my square has, rounded edges. So there's harmony in that. And then variety, having maybe a variety of colors, maybe a variety of biases in a single color, maybe a variety of shapes, a variety of textures, edges, whatever. You just want to look and see how you can make things have some variety. Line. So we've got super straight lines, curved lines, squiggly, jagged lines, broken lines, different textures, space. How do you communicate that one element is closer to you, one element is farther from you, that there is space between them? Shape, obviously, is shape. Form is 3D, making something appear 3D or using 3D objects. And size, obviously, variations in sizes. In our color theory arena, we've got variations in hue, so red and green, variations in saturation, so we've got this highly saturated blue, and then there's these very desaturated grays. Value, light and dark, bias, these are all in the red family, but they all have a different bias. Some are very orangey, some are almost purple. Contrast is what we're looking at all of this. Composition we'll talk about in a minute. Focal point. Focal point is different from the subject of the painting, but it's also pretty similar, and it escapes me at this moment exactly how they are different. Active space and resting space, I like to talk about these together. So in our resting space illustration here, see all this activity, all these movements, that's active space. This here, this big restful space of just one soft color, this is a resting space. These two work really good together. If you want to have a ton of active space, you want a really exciting painting, make sure that there is a bit, just like a small bit of resting space. So if I were to frame this, I would say, here's some resting space. Maybe here's some resting space. Mark making, that's just how you make your marks, it depends on the brushes you use, the material you use, the energy you put into making the marks, etc. And that is it. That was just our quick refresher on that. Do you feel that all of these items are needed in every painting, especially abstract? Joanne, that is the best question, and I was just about to go into that because the answer is no. You do not have to sit down and plan out how your painting is going to be done using every single one of these elements. So if you think about a black and white painting, let's just say it's a black and white portrait, okay? So in black and white, we don't have a contrast of saturation. There's no contrast of bias. There's no contrast of hue. All we really have as far as our color is we have a contrast of value, black versus white. Exactly, Eileen, thank you. In the Edgar Payne book, she points out that he says it's guidelines, not rules. So in that same black and white painting, it might be wise, in the portrait to have a contrast of line. Maybe, the side of the face that you want people to look at is going to have a very crisp edge, but the hair is going to be very soft. So that's a contrast of line. You could have a contrast of texture in, again, the skin versus the hair or the background, the clothing, whatever. You could find ways to focus on any one of these elements in that. Yeah. So no, I think especially in abstract, I think the important thing is to consider which contrasts, which elements you are passionate about. So for me, in the paintings that I'm getting ready to make, the contrasts that I primarily want to focus on is a contrast of saturation. I love heavily muted. Let me grab these and I'll just give you an example of what that means. Heavily muted colors, very, very gray, very, very earthy. So let's say this blue and this, that brown. Just pulling out some random desaturates. Maybe that grayish blue. And then the contrast of saturation, since these are all kind of grayed down, my contrast color might be that. So I love that. I love that contrast of saturation. So this is one that I will focus on in my paintings that are coming. I really like a mess. Oh, you guys. I just cleaned this place. You don't want to even see what kind of a mess it is right now. So anyway, a contrast of saturation. From time to time, I might focus on a contrast of value, but I may not. Some of my paintings, some of my artworks may end up being all very dark or very light or very mid-ground. There may not be a lot of contrast in value. Contrast in line is something that I really want to focus on. There's going to be a heavy contrast of line as well as texture. And then by default, you create contrasts in some of the other areas without even having to really think about it. So when you're making an abstract painting, I would say think about 2 to 3, let's say 3. 3 is a good number. 3 specific ways you want to create contrast in your painting. Like, choose them carefully. What do I like to see? Do I like it when I see a painting that's got, lots of repeating shapes, but in various sizes, like bubbles or squares or bugs or whatever it is? Am I really attracted to paintings that have this heavy contrast in size? If so, then maybe that's what I want to pick. Okay, so contrast in line, contrast in texture, contrast in saturation. I'm definitely focusing my attention on active versus resting space. My focus will be something that I kind of find as I'm making each individual piece, because I think that there should be, in these ones that are in my head, there should be a focal point, but yours may not. Like Jackson Pollock, there's no real focal point there. All right, so yeah, I'm going to be doing some mixed media stuff, and the reason I'm being really vague about it is it's a few reasons. First of all, if I spill all of the beans to you guys, I tell you everything that I've got in my plans might change. As I start working on these ideas, those plans might change. And also, if I just tell you all of my idea, then my brain goes, oh, we're all done. No need to continue down this path. We've already done the thing. But really, I haven't done the thing. I've just talked about the thing. So that's really why I'm not saying much. But like I was telling the art family members yesterday during our live painting, I was so excited about this the other day that I spontaneously jumped on the Blick website and spent $70 on RIT dye, fabric dye. So I hope this lasts. I hope I actually follow through with it. I've also been, let me just show you these. They're not done. This is part of what I'm going to be doing. I told you guys, this is mixed media for sure. I don't want to drop them. I just made all of these little beads. I spent all morning drilling out the holes, making sure that they were right. I made the beads a couple days ago, but they had to dry. And then I'm varnishing them, and yeah, so those are going to be parts of my paintings. Anyway, like I said, composition, and if I'm just too much, please stop me and ask whatever questions you have. Composition is very important in abstract painting. It's one of the only things you've got that gives it any kind of structure. So I think that it's important to focus on that. Not just go splatter, 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 which you can do, but you'll be more successful if you plan. So here I've got printer paper. It's just a few sheets of printer paper. It's nothing fancy. And a pencil. Just a pencil. I'm going to kind of show you a technique that I woke up with in the middle of the night thinking, oh, that's how I'm going to plan my composition. And it may not work for every abstract painting, but I think with some tweaking, it could work for just about any. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to start scribbling. I'm not thinking about anything. I'm not trying to create certain types of scribbles or shapes. Nothing. You could even have like your kid or your grandkid or whoever do this for you and use what they did, okay? Just random. That's it. Now, I'm going to take another sheet of paper. And depending on what size or shape, not size, but what shape of canvas you want, you might want to cut out a different shape from this. I'm just going to do it almost at random. It doesn't really matter. So I folded it in half, and then I'm going to just kind of draw roughly like half of a rectangle or a square or something. Where did my blade? There it is. And then cut that out. And we'll go over a couple of different ways that this could be adjusted if you have, you know, different types of abstract work in your mind. All right, good enough. So when I open this, ta-da, there's a canvas shape. So let's say that I'm going to be making my paintings on a square canvas. Now I can take this, and now I can place this and find a composition that's pleasing. You know, remember the whole rule of thirds thing. Rule of thirds. It's a guideline of thirds. Basically, the rule of thirds says that your most interesting elements, your focuses, should be placed on the 1/3 line. So pretend like that's evenly split into 3, 1, 2, 3. It should all be even. And then we're going to split it 1, 2, 3 that way as well. The rule of thirds says that your subject is better placed in these intersections, or at least close to them. Like you could have it kind of being right here. I would say that's acceptable. Or, you know, right here. But it encourages you to stay away from the center and the center, not there. Like you don't want to put your horizon on here necessarily. Your horizon would be better served being roughly here or roughly here, etc. So I'm going to kind of think about that as well as just what I find pleasing on here. So I'm going to move this around till I find something that I think is exciting. Kind of like, ooh, I like that right there. So I'm going to take a pen and I'm going to draw the square around that shape. And I'll just keep going. I'll find a couple more. That one's kind of cool. Maybe one more. Ooh, I like that. Right there. All right, so there I have my 3 shapes. So from here, I'm going to look at each one individually, and it's easier to see it when you put the thing back over it and decide, you know, what is it that I really like about this? Is this actually the bottom and this is the top, or should I turn it this way or this way? I think I actually do like it this way. So I'm just going to mark it for myself. This is the top. This is the bottom. And now I'm going to solidify the parts of this that I really like. I really like this right here. Maybe I even want a little bit more of that. I like this, but I don't like the exact angle it's at, so I'm going to zoom you in just a little bit. I'm just going to change the angle of it just a little bit. Bring it down. I like this. I don't necessarily like all those, so I'm going to ignore them. So these are the shapes and the lines I've decided I like from that. And here, this one is definitely upside down, so we're going to say top, bottom, and I like this kind of horizon area. I really like this. And it kind of repeats there, so that's a little bit of a repeat. Maybe I'm going to ignore all those other pencil lines, and so on. So we would do that all over this. Ooh, I actually like that right there. But I'm going to change the angle of that. I like how jagged that is. Nice variation in line there from soft and smooth to kind of jagged. This feels kind of drapey. Anyway, so I might go through and do that. And in fact, I did. So I'll show you real quick. I have like 5 or 6 paintings already planned out. But I have not started them yet because I don't have all the materials I need yet. So here's mine that I did yesterday. This was my first one. I'm not going to let you look at it too much because, like I said, it might change. So this was exactly what I needed to help me come up with my composition. But we could use this same thing. Maybe in your head, your abstract paintings that you want to do is more about color and form, right? You like form, and form being shapes, squares, circles, amoebas. Those are forms. They're there. So you've decided that you want to do forms and shapes. So how could we use this exact same technique? Well, take our paper. Zoom me back out just a little bit. And if your focus is going to be on form and color, then you have to plan your color. Do you like super vibrant colors? Do you like that contrast of saturation? What kind of a color palette do you want to use? Maybe you want to use all citrusy colors. So we'll pull out some green and orange and yellow and maybe some bright pink. Yeah, let's say that these are your colors that you've decided on. All right, so we're going to take these and we're going to just do the exact same thing. I'm going to kind of focus it in clumps rather than scribbly lines though, because our focus is form. You could even like spend time just making actual shapes, overlapping them. Just be really random about it here. This is where you can be super random. This is all just play and thinking. This is not the abstract art. This is random stuff. Ooh, I actually really like that color, especially with the pink. Big blocks of solid color, overlapping, whatever. Okay, now I'm going to take the same thing, and we can look at this. What do I like? Ooh, that's kind of cool right there. I like that composition. I like the variation in color that we have. I think this is going to murder my pen trying to draw on wax. Let's use a marker. It's a little bit better. And over here, that's kind of fun. Right there. Oh yeah, I was really excited by this. And this affords me that opportunity to have a heavy active space and a heavy resting space. So I'm going to put that one in. So here's the 3 that I picked. And now I can decide which is the top, which is the bottom, which parts do I really, really like. Over here, I have decided I like this. Maybe I want to add just a little bit more of the pink. Keep that nice and active. And maybe I've decided I want to bring in a little bit of a pale blue for my resting space, and that's going to be really soft. I'm not thinking about the techniques I'm going to be using, what colors of paint I'm going to be using. I'm not thinking about any of that. I'm just simply looking at what gives me enough to work with. So now I could go to my canvas and with whatever techniques and materials I like to use, I know how to use, I can try and bring this composition and basic colors into a real painting. And it's an abstract painting that has been planned out. I know what the composition is going onto the canvas. You know, no matter what size that composition is, I know exactly what I'm going to do. And I'm going to ruin it actually here real quick, because I've paid attention to the rule of thirds when I was looking through the little cutout. See how that image is. This was a really exciting area while I was scribbling. Remember, I said I love that color with that pink, and that conjunction of those colors is on that rule of thirds. I've got this area over here that is almost all resting space. There's a little activity in there, but I feel like it's got good balance. I feel like it's got that good, exciting contrast of color that I wanted, etc. You could just splatter all over it and find something, and turn them into actual objects or whatever. But this was like a revelation to me, and I seriously was like laying in bed. I'm all, I know how I'm going to do it. And I was super excited that it worked out so well. I'm really, really happy with that technique. So what I want you guys to do is sit down and think of a list of questions to ask yourselves about the art that you do like, or when you see abstract art, or even just textures like in nature or in industrial areas or whatever. Like for me, I know that I love abandoned buildings. I love abandoned warehouses, factories. I love that decay of industrial elements. And I'm really excited by the contrast of maybe soft plush elements with that. Like if you see a photo of like a decaying factory or something, and there's a really ornate soft sofa, you know, in there, like that's a really interesting contrast, and that's really exciting to me. Or, you know, the same industrial decay with plants growing up through it. That's a really beautiful contrast that I love. And what kind of colors do I love? Well, the colors that I love are primarily going to be from that. There's going to be a lot of grays and muted colors, muted blues or browns, blacks, whites and off-whites, very neutral, desaturated colors. But whether it's nature or also man-made, there are occasionally pops of color. Maybe it's a bit of spray paint, like security spray paint. Like, don't go past here. It's this bright orange pop in this super gray area. Or it's this bright green pop of leaves in this super gray area. So those are the kind of colors that I really like. I like that aesthetic. And then just finding ways to kind of communicate that through the different bits of contrast that you can have, whether it's contrast in your colors, contrast in your textures, shapes, sizes, things like that. Yeah, too much contrasting anything can be too busy or too distracting. These are really great questions. So let's talk about how we can do some contrast without overwhelming, okay? So let's say contrast of texture, just because that's what we were talking about. So let's say you've decided texture. You're going to have contrast of texture, and here's your canvas. And you want, you like something really spiky and kind of scribbly and active. And then we've got like swirly and doo-doo-doo. And then maybe there's, polka dots, or what are some other textures we can do? We can do like things like that. When you start doing that all over a canvas, it can be really overwhelming. Or contrast in, let's say bias. Let's make a contrast in bias overload. So I'm just pulling out a bunch of reds. So we're going to find this color, which is also introducing more texture. And when we've got all of these different textures and all of these different biases, and we've got lots of contrast like we wanted, but is it maybe too much? It feels a little chaotic. It feels like, what am I supposed to be looking at here? Now at this point, everything contrasts everything else so much that nothing is contrasting. It's just kind of a mess. So instead, let's do the exact same thing. I want a painting that is a contrast of texture and bias. So I'm going to draw my square again. I think that it's more important to definitely less is more. So we are going to have a contrast in texture. So maybe I'll just come in with this, and I like that first one that I did. The first kind of. Okay, kind of a little active there. And maybe that's it. Because when I come back with these are going to introduce more texture. But I'm going to have a contrast of bias. So instead of using all of these, I'm going to pick a couple. I'm going to just pick the 3 that look the most different. Let's go with these ones. So we've got a little bit of contrast in texture because that contrasts that. It's not the same texture. And we've got this one. we've got this one. I think that we've got so much contrast in here. And I personally think this is a lot more interesting than this. This looks like you were testing out some crayons. You were maybe testing out some pencils. This one looks, it's very chaotic and it's very scattered, but it looks a little bit more intentional. It looks a little more thought out. We could even take this a step further and say we're going to add one more little punch of contrast and contrast of hue. Just one. It doesn't have to be terribly exciting or overly stated. It's just a soft, kind of a soft minty area there, like that. So I have my contrast of texture. I have my contrast of bias, and I've got a contrast of hue. I've also got active and resting space here. And I don't think, for me anyway, this is not overwhelming. But you can simplify it down as far as you want. Does that make sense? It's not about throwing everything at the wall and seeing what sticks. It's about being very deliberate. Like I know in the paintings that I'm going to do, I keep saying paintings. It's the artwork that I'm going to do. There will be, I think, contrast of texture and composition are going to be the two primary elements that I'm focusing on in these pieces. There will definitely be, consideration of color and saturation, value, all of that. But the primary things that I am going for in these paintings I want to make is composition and contrast of texture. But with that contrast of texture, I think it's important to have smooth, very smooth resting area. Again, that contrast of texture is going to feel very active, so it needs to be up against something very inactive so that it stands out without overwhelming you. So I've just kind of talked at you guys and exhausted myself, but what questions do you guys have? Tell me about some of the contrasts that you like. Oh, Canelo's in here. Can you see him? He's sneezing. Don't look at the mess on my floor. I don't think you can see him. Oh, he's right there. Do you see him? Anyway, he's my shy cat. And he has a mixed media book. Yes. So let me show you. I have a couple of abstract painting books. Let me grab a couple of them and we will just kind of talk about that real quick. I love, love, love this one. And yeah, let's just start with this one. See how this goes. If you guys do not follow Petra on YouTube, you should start immediately. She's amazing. She's this German artist. So all of her videos are in German, but she talks really slowly. She's got a very soft, very pretty voice, and there's always English subtitles. And she wrote this book, and it finally came out in English, so yay! So let's look at some of her abstracts, and we're just going to kind of talk about some of the design elements as well as like contrasts that she makes in some of these images. Has anybody seen any of her videos? Okay, so here she's just kind of talking about, you know, kind of drama and everything and how things can come together. But like in here, we have a very stark contrast in hue. Her line work is very dramatic. So like this brush stroke, that's a very deliberate move that contrasts to the splatters, which feel much more organic. You know, it's very linear, where these are very rounded. She's created space in that, you know, this blue is so forward, and it's got this heavily desaturated area between the blue and this heavily saturated orange. And that kind of makes it feel like there's some space there. That orange is in the distance. The blue is right up in our face. Yeah. So Joanne says that she loves when she gets to play with colors. Yeah, you can absolutely go outside of complementary colors to get that. And sometimes I feel like some of that is personal preference, but experiment with saturation. So let me show you just with these cards one more time, just like how you can get an exciting play and like vibration of color without thinking about just opposite colors. So I really like this orange. Bright, 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 highly, highly saturated. I do think it looks super exciting next to this blue gray, but that's because they're complementary colors. Ooh, yeah, look, this color is almost green. It's kind of a greeny brown. And green and orange, they're not opposites. They don't even really necessarily sit in any kind of color palette together, except maybe a split complementary where we would use purple, or I guess that would be a triad. But look at together. Like they're really exciting together if used in the right way. And I think that's because we've got a heavy contrast in value. The orange one is much lighter than this one. I thought they would both have the value number on them. But it's also because of the contrast in the saturation, not just the value. So those look really great together. Yeah, just experiment. Joanne, go to like a hardware store and just grab a whole bunch of paint swatches and just sit down and play with them. That's basically what these are, but this box of stuff was like $50. Ugh. I only bought it because I teach. That's what I told myself anyway. Yeah, they worked really good together. So let's just see a couple of things here. Yeah, let's get to that one. Oh, yeah. In fact, look here. She actually just did something very similar to what I was doing with... I don't even know where everything is anymore, you guys. If you came here, you'd be like, how do you work in this? She did something very similar to what I did here. So she just kind of took a card with some paint that she knew she wanted to do and just kind of randomly, just played. And then she took a mat board with the hole cut out, and what she did was just place it down and say, okay, I like this. Took that element out, kind of embellished it. But she did use that to go all across this piece here to decide what she liked and what she wanted to keep. So you could do something like this too. But I just want to kind of show you. Here we go. This is what we want. Yeah, I like this one a lot. So let's see if I can. And I think there's a video on her YouTube channel about how she made this one. So let's talk about, first of all, tell me, do you guys like this painting? You can say no if you don't. I didn't paint it. I won't be offended. But the things that I really like about this painting is, first of all, we've got this active space that really starts here. It's hard to see on the camera, but it's very like physically textured. You could feel it. So we've got this texture and these shapes and this movement and all of this through here. And there's a little here, but it's very subdued. So we've got this big open area of resting space. Nice balance of active versus resting. We've got some really interesting contrasting color combinations. I mean, it's kind of analogous, you know, reds to purples to blues, but I think it works really good to create a vibration because this blue is so subdued. It's so pale, but the reds and the purples are so highly saturated. So there's a contrast of saturation. There's even this pink in here, which is a desaturate of red. That's a nice contrast too. We have the contrast in textures, but we've got these like super scratchy marks, super scratchy. But then she's painted these kind of ghostly flower shapes. So we have these super scratchy, jagged marks paired with these soft, delicate, transparent flower shapes. Yes, it is. No, it does feel very clean. Exactly. Especially with this open resting space. This feels so relaxing and very peaceful. And even the active space, it doesn't feel chaotic and like, you know, the whole painting, I think, feels very relaxing. So those are the things that I like that she did here. If you squint your eyes at it really tight, remember we talked about if you squint your eyes really hard until you can just barely see, what you're left with is primarily the values. So if you do that really hard, there's little bits like here, here, and here that are quite a bit darker than everything else. But then we've just got kind of this sliver at the bottom that's dark. The rest of it is pretty pale. So there's not a huge contrast in value, but there's a little bit. Yeah, like a chipped up wall with different paint colors. Exactly. And it's hard to tell in the pictures, but this right here, that's gold leaf. So that's very metallic. So that could be another contrast. Here, we don't have a lot of contrast in color. You know, a little bit of saturation difference. This is more saturated than here. Notice her horizon is not dead center. There's not a lot of contrast of line or there's really not a huge amount of contrast here, except right here we've got this line and it kind of fractures and we've got some bright gold on there. Again, that's gold leaf. It doesn't look like it in the picture. And our darkest bits, there's next to no contrast in value if you squint at it. It's a little darker up here. But right here, these little tiny punches throughout this line are very dark, and you can see those very, very distinctly. You don't have resting spaces. Yeah, so find ways to make some resting spaces. One thing I like to do, what do I have over here? Oh, I do have this. Okay. One thing I like to do sometimes when I'm doing abstract painting, and I typically do it with gesso, but I've got some white paint here that'll do. If you're doing along like this, and you like this, but you think, God, it's just too busy. In fact, let's use this one because this one's chaos incarnate. It's too busy. So I'm going to take some white paint. Like I said, typically like to use gesso. That's just me. And I'm going to come in here and I'm going to block out some of these areas a little bit and just create a bit more of a resting space. It doesn't have to be obliterated. Even just softening it like that, that brings some rest into this. See, just doing that even brought just a little bit of calm to this painting, and I might even do it more. Be careful though not to get into this 50-50 thing where like 50% of the canvas is chaos and 50% of it is restful. Make one of them the standout. And then you can introduce back in if you want to. I'm going to go ahead and just block out all of this over here. We'll leave kind of like that. I don't want to separate this too much from that top area. All right. We'll say we just did that to try and correct the fact that we have no resting space. And then when it's dry, we can come back in. Ooh, we could even introduce a little bit of extra texture here, like through these spots. That's another little contrast of texture. But it doesn't totally do away with the calm spaces. Or like Petra did in that, we can do like some ghostly little almost abstract flower shapes in there without getting too specific. And now I've activated a little bit of that resting space, but it still feels restful, especially considering that. So those are just a couple ideas. It's all about intention. That's what I'm trying to get across to you. Good abstract art is going to be very intentional. If you watch her videos, you know, she may start out being very chaotic, just slapping things around and seeing what happens. But eventually, it all starts to kind of coalesce into something specific, very intentional. Here's one that I want to talk about because I think it's got some really good contrasts. Okay, so if we squint hard at this one, there's almost no contrast in value, almost none. Very little difference in value. This is probably a little bit darker than most of it. Sorry, there's a glare. Okay, but if you squint at it really hard, very little contrast in value. It's all very relaxing. It's a very restful image. There's a little bit of activity, but it's very subdued. There's not a lot of contrast in color. There's a little saturation difference. There's definitely contrast in texture. I would say all of this through here, not the squares, but everything else is very calm, very soft. This is a little more organic and textury. But then we've got these repetitive shapes they have a variation in size, and they are gold, which is a really exciting contrast to these soft, subdued colors. And these crisp, sharp, hard lines are very contrasting to everything else. And something like this doesn't happen by accident, you know, it's planning. So anyway, guys, I want you this week, next week, I'm not sure if we're going to do this again next Sunday or if we'll wait a week. We'll see what happens. Anyway, I want you kind of looking, I want you thinking. This has excellent contrast of texture. Thinking about what kind of contrasts do you like? Not what kind of abstract art do you like, but what kind of themes and colors and contrasts and all of that. What kind of things really attract you? And not not necessarily just in art. Like I said, a lot of my inspiration comes from abandoned places, as if you didn't know that. You guys knew that. Think about that. And then think about how could you bring those feelings and those vibes that you get from those into an abstract painting without being like, I like flowers, so I'm going to paint some abstract flowers, and then doing what you think you can to make an abstract flower. Instead, maybe bring the textures, the outline, the way the outline of a flower flows, colors, things like that you can bring into a painting to give that feeling that you get when you look at flowers without painting flowers. So that's what I want you to do this week. And if you happen to see any abstract work that you want to pick apart, like we did here, what's good about it, what's bad about a piece of art, whatever. Annie, you totally should. Be brave. Take photos of your mixed media book. We would love to see, and maybe you're onto something and you've already done all the hard work. I do promise that as soon as I have some of my new artwork to show you, that I will. I'm hoping later this week. I don't know how long it's going to take me to get my Blick order. They are notoriously slow shippers. But yeah, as soon as I get that, I can start experimenting. It will honestly probably be a couple of weeks before I get any artwork done. But I am working on it because it's all intentional. So, all right, guys, if you don't have any other questions, then I'm going to let you go. And I hope that we can have some interesting conversations this week in Discord about abstract art and design elements. So let me know if you have any questions in Discord or in YouTube, and I will talk to you guys again soon. All right? Goodbye.